Let's bring in our NFL and draft analyst Ryan Wilson to talk about the situation that's surrounding the 49ers and Brandon Aiyuk. So for most of the day, we had already seen reports that deals were in place in both New England and Cleveland, Ryan, but now we're seeing some reinforcement from Pittsburgh. What does that tell you that the Steelers are now back in the mix, reportedly?
It's interesting. This isn't your Kevin Colbert Pittsburgh Steelers. Omar Khan, the general manager who took over for Kevin Colbert, has been incredibly active in the time that he's been general manager. And you heard last night, as you mentioned, Tommy, that maybe the Steelers were out and it was down to 2 teams. And apparently Omar Khan felt differently. They do have a need at number 2 wide receiver. They traded Deontay Johnson to the Carolina Panthers. They have George Pickens, who is the legit number 1, but he's going to need help. They have Van Jefferson, who they signed. They have Calvin Austin, who's undersized, the more of a slot receiver. And they drafted Roman Wilson, who's battled injuries early in camp. So there's certainly a need there, and this is a new offense under Arthur Smith and, of course, Russ Wilson and Justin Fields. So I would not count them out. The question, and we heard Kyle Shanahan sort of allude to it, it's going to come down to money. Does he want Justin Jefferson money, which is north of $30 million a year, or does he want to get closer to Jalen Waddle money, which is like 27-ish? And I think it's going to be somewhere in between is where we see Brandon Aiyuk end up. But I don't think the 49ers are willing to clearly give him what he wants. Otherwise, we wouldn't be having these conversations right now.
If we were just to continue that thought and play a little more fantasy football, Ryan, we're taking a look at, and this is perfect timing. I was going to ask you, does Aiyuk favor maybe a Wilson-type quarterback or a Fields-type quarterback, you think?
That's a great question. We know Russ Wilson and his ability to throw the ball down the field, but Justin Fields has looked good. The issue with Justin Fields has been the inconsistency with the short and intermediate stuff, and his ability to run has been both good and bad in terms of staying on time within an offense. I think if you ask the question in terms of who would run Kyle Shanahan's offense better, you think probably it's Russ Wilson prior to going to Denver. But at the end of the day, and I was just talking to our buddy Deanna Cannell about this, be careful what you ask for when you're Brandon Aiyuk, wherever you end up, if it's not San Francisco, because you got it pretty good there. I know you want to get paid, but you might also suffer from Devontae Adams syndrome and end up going from Green Bay and Aaron Rodgers to a situation in Las Vegas that you're looking to get out of.
So you've talked about potential fits in Pittsburgh. Let's go through the other 2 teams and see how those things would play out. If we go with Cleveland, it's been reported a deal in place. That means Amari Cooper goes back the other way. What do we think about Brandon Aiyuk with the dog pound?
On paper, it sounds pretty good if Deshaun Watson can stay healthy, something he struggled to do in Cleveland. And if we get the Deshaun Watson who was at the top of his game in Houston, which we haven't seen yet in Cleveland the last few years. You mentioned Amari Cooper would be on his way to the West Coast, but that still leaves Elijah Moore. They acquired Jerry Jeudy this offseason. They had Seth Tillman, who had a really good rookie campaign. So there are a lot of playmakers there on that offense. The offensive line is quietly a really good unit. And oh, by the way, that defense is one of the best defenses in the AFC. That makes sense to me. I think it could be enticing for someone like a Brandon Aiyuk to go to that situation. But again, it's contingent on the quarterback being the guy that you think it is. Although that said, last year Joe Flacco came in and took that team to the playoffs.
What would Brandon Aiyuk in a Patriots uniform look like?
It would look like him getting into a time machine and going back to when Tom Brady was still there. Because as we currently sit here, Jacoby Brissett's a nice backup to have as you move your way to that future franchise quarterback in Drake May, but right now it's tough sledding offensively for that unit. They've drafted some offensive linemen, but they still have huge question marks there. They do have question marks at wide receiver. That's why we're having the conversation about a Brandon Aiyuk going in that direction. There are conversations that maybe Kendrick Bourne would go from New England back to San Francisco. They have KJ Osborne and Pop Douglas on the roster. You see them there, Juju Smith-Schuster, and they drafted Jalen Polk, who's been had a good camp along with Javon Baker. But again, this offense resembles nothing of those Tom Brady high-powered offenses we saw 5, 10, 15 years ago. And that feels like the closest to the Devontae Adams / Las Vegas Raiders situation if you're Brandon Aiyuk. And I would imagine this would be third on this list if I just had to guess. But again, if you pay him $35 million a year, I would imagine he'd be happy playing anywhere.
And you mentioned Brissett. Of course, the future, though, is Drake May. What do we think would potentially have that #1 wide receiver to go with your young quarterback?
Oh, that's best case scenario, right? I mean, we saw it in Chicago with picks 1 and 9 and Caleb Williams and Rome Odunze. But if you look at what they have around Caleb Williams in Chicago, it's very dissimilar to what Drake May is looking at when he goes to practice. And that's a rare situation in Chicago, no doubt about it. But again, look at Cincinnati. Joe Burrow and what he has in Jamar Chase. They were drafted in different years, but clearly number 1 and number 1 at their positions. They played together to LSU, and it could be a game changer. Even guys like Tyreek Hill going to Miami for Tua, or Stephon Diggs going to Buffalo for Josh Allen. It can raise it can elevate the way your young quarterback plays, but there have to be a lot of other things taken care of, offensive line, defense, and so on and so forth. The Patriots have the defense sorted out. A lot of question marks on the offensive side of the ball, and again, that's why we're having the Aiyuk conversation. And I don't think Drake May starts. I don't know if we see him in the first half of the season, Tommy. If he does play early, it might be because they're struggling, whether Brandon Aiyuk's there or not.
If Aiyuk does head to Foxborough, it could be the foundation and building blocks of a winning team once again, of course, having so much success with, you mentioned, with Tom Brady and company there. When we talk about the San Francisco 49ers, they have been a very good team for quite some time now. And if you heard the interaction with the media with Kyle Shanahan, they've been down this road with a couple of key players in years past, Ryan. If Brandon Aiyuk does indeed get shipped and moved away from the Bay Area, how does this impact the San Francisco 49ers and their Super Bowl hopes, you think?
Yeah, Kyle Shanahan was asked about that, and he said obviously Aiyuk's a fantastic player, so there would be an impact. But there's also a reason that he and John Lynch drafted Ricky Pearsall, the wide receiver out of Florida, in the first round. This was the contingency plan. They didn't come out and say it, but it's not hard to read between the lines. Now, he's had some injuries early on in camp, so he hasn't been 100% Ricky Pearsall. But they also have some guy named Deebo Samuel and Christian McCaffrey and George Kittle, and they are absolutely stacked. And there's a situation with a young wide receiver either wanting to get paid or perhaps asking to leave their current situation. The one that you feel the best about in terms of the team being able to overcome losing that wide receiver are, in fact, the San Francisco 49ers, right? Because of Kyle Shanahan, because of all the other playmakers. And they're going to have to pay Brock Purdy pretty soon as well. They've already paid Deebo. They paid Christian McCaffrey. They have Trent Williams. He may want more money soon as well if he doesn't retire. So those are other concerns they have to sort through. And I think that Kyle Shanahan understands that there could be a situation where they're in a post-Brandon Aiyuk world. Again, that's why you have Ricky Pearsall. They drafted Jacob Cowing, the slot receiver out of Arizona as well. They have Danny Gray, who they drafted a few years ago, who's a burner from SMU, who hasn't done much yet but has an opportunity to. So there are plans in the works in case Brandon Aiyuk isn't around. But I would just reiterate, stay where you are, Brandon. There are worse things than being in Northern California on a team that's perennially contending for the Super Bowl.
Sportsline did predict the numbers and kind of crunch them all together. There'd be about a 3% difference in the Super Bowl odds there for the San Francisco 49ers if he does indeed leave. Ryan Wilson joining us here in HQ. R-Dub, certainly appreciate it. And a reminder about the NFL returning soon, folks, about a month's time. CBS and Paramount Plus, notable week one games, I should say. Arizona at Buffalo, Jacksonville at Miami, and Vegas at the Chargers.